Hey everybody, this is Kevin McFarland from The Art of Emergency Nursing, and you're listening to 30 Days to Being a Badass ER Nurse. In the next 30 days, I'm going to give you some quick tips and tricks to help you be a better ER nurse. And of course, as always, it's not just me you're going to hear from. I've recruited some of my friends to give you some of their tips and tricks so they can share their knowledge as well. So don't forget to subscribe so that you catch all the episodes. And if you find one of these tips and tricks are really helpful, give me a shout out on social media and share it with your friends. Let's get into today's tip. Aristotle once said, "Anyone can become angry. That's easy. But to be angry with the right person to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, the right way, that's not easy." Now, as a badass emergency nurse, there's going to be times that you're going to have to deal with angry patients. That's not uncommon. What I want to do is spend some time telling you a couple tips and tricks to prevent that anger from becoming violence. So we're going to talk a little bit about de-escalation. One of the things I'd like you to think about first is what makes people angry when they're in the hospital. You would think, hey, we're taking care of you. You're here where you're safe. You should be not angry. You should be okay. You should be good, right? But if you think about it, think about what being in the hospital means to them. The hospital is one of the few places where you have almost a complete loss of power. You're not in control of anything. And if you're a patient, you're not even in control of your own functions. Someone's got to get up, disconnect you from the monitor, and allow you to get up and go to the bathroom. That loss of power is tough for patients. And oftentimes they feel like they're losing respect as well. We bring them in, we put them in hospital gowns, and then we tether them to the monitor with all those cables. So it's understandable why patients would feel a loss of control. And some folks really hate being at that loss of control. I know I would hate it. So let's talk a little bit more about the patient experience. If they're in the emergency department, then things didn't turn out the way they'd planned. This is not what they expected. Very few people get up in the morning and say, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to go to the emergency department today. Though there are a few. Most, however, do not. Oftentimes they're experiencing pain. Sometimes they're experiencing anxiety. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member that's in that boat, which sometimes makes people even more angry. So keep in mind that they're not in a good mindset when they come to the emergency department. It's important to recognize that escalating behavior and try to cut it off as quickly as possible. I just want to touch briefly on some of the signs that patients are escalating. If you see a patient who starts pacing or starting to get restless, they're starting to get agitated. When they get to the point where they're clenching their fist or they're having increasingly loud speech, they are escalating. They need an intervention. They need some de-escalation. What your patient's going to be experiencing that you may or may not be able to tell is their heart rate's going to start to beat faster. Their breath rate's going to start to increase. Again, they may start clenching their fist. Oftentimes their face will feel either cold or hot. They'll start sweating and their body temperature elevates. They may start escalating with rapid speech. They may start actually making threats, and they may start cursing. When you see these behaviors, you know that you need to jump in there and intervene right away. So let's talk about some possible interventions for trying to de-escalate an angry patient. One of the things I'll tell you is that what oftentimes these patients need is just a little bit of time. They need somebody to listen to their concerns and actually hear them. This is a good time to tap into that empathy of yours. When patients start to get getting belligerent or angry or pissed off, it's hard to stay calm. But trying to have that little bit of empathy and feeling what you would feel in that situation is often helpful. That goes a really long way. And remember that treating people the way you would want to be treated or the way you would want your loved ones to be treated. I don't know if any of you are like me, and I have people in my life who have a quick fuse or who escalate quickly or get angry quickly. When I think about these patients, that's who I think about. And I think about, would this person end up getting tied down immediately or would end up having some physical interventions? And a lot of times those physical interventions can be avoided. It's always important to remember in these situations to keep your cool. This isn't personal. They don't know you. They've never even met your mom. I mean, come on. Don't take things personal. People will say terrible, terrible things to you. Patients will say terrible things. And whatever weakness they may perceive, they're going to pick on it. They're going to pick at it. So if you're a heavy person, they may make some heavy jokes. If you're a real skinny person, they may make some skinny jokes. Whatever they think might be your weakness, anything that might get under your skin, they very well may try to poke at that to try to get a rise out of you. It's really important that you keep your cool and never show that you're getting angry. Because if you're getting angry, you've already lost the battle. Now, one thing that's really important to do is mind your body language. Your body language sometimes speaks volumes more than you do. If you're like me and have a tendency for the eye roll, you got to really watch that eye roll. Make sure you don't do it. But mind your body language. If you're standing there squared off in front of the patient with your arms crossed, everything about that posture says confrontation. You don't want to do that. You don't want to have a confrontational body language unless that's what you're trying to project. And typically, that kind of confrontational behavior is just going to get things escalated. At all times, with your body language, one of the things I'll tell you is at all times it's important to keep yourself physically protected. If you're squared off against the patient and you're standing in front of them like a big square target, you're going to get kicked in the nuts. Guys, think about that. Think about that. The first thing they're always going to try to go for is kick you in the nuts. Ladies, if you get kicked there too, it's going to hurt. So always kind of keep yourself. What we used to always call it was a bladed stance. And what that means is to be a little bit at angle. And that angle gives you an escape route. So you want to be, instead of squared off against the patient where you'd have to really move and make some interventions to move, if you're kind of in that bladed angle, so if you're at a little bit of an angle, if you think of like the fighting stance, but without making like the fighting stance kind of stand, if you think about that, where you're just at a little bit of an angle to where you can actually duck out and get away as quickly as possible in case things do escalate. Sometimes what patients need is just that minute or two to blow off some steam. Give them a chance to calm down. When I talk to patients, when I'm trying to de-escalate patients, I'm not going to argue with them. I often tell patients, I'm not there to argue. I'm not there to fight with anybody. I'd be happy to listen if they need somebody to listen. But what I tend to do is the louder they get, the quieter I get. And that just throws them off balance just enough that they're like, wait, what's this guy doing? And sometimes they'll come down to your level. Not always, but sometimes. So that's something you may want to try. I'm a big fan for having just one person be the point of communication with the patient. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to have the nurse talking to the patient, the doctor talking to the patient, the charge nurse, the house supervisor, security. When that many people are all trying to communicate with the same patient, they tend to get a little bit overwhelmed. So one person should be designated as the person who is having the conversation and trying to de-escalate. The others are there as supportive, but only one person gets to be the person who's talking. Now, with that said, that one person also has to have the ability to decide when we're going to go hands-on with the patient. And you need to have a very clear communication with your security of when you're going to go hands-on with the patient. Because once you start that process, you got to commit. One of the things I always tell people is have a plan before you put hands on the patients. Because the minute you do, if you don't have a plan, things aren't going to go well. So that plan can be real simple. It can be like, okay, Mike, you're going to take the left arm. Bob, you're going to take the right arm. Kelly, you're going to take the left leg. Dawn, you're going to take the right leg. And you get everybody ready with their role. Too often I see not having a plan result in a melee and everybody grabbing and doing different things. That's how people get hurt. Don't do that shit. The last two things I want to say about this, and there's so much more, I'm just scratching the surface. One I want to tell you is get security involved sooner than later. Don't wait until the patient becomes absolutely violent and out of control before you call your security team. Hopefully you have a security team. The last thing I want to say is if you do get assaulted by a patient, make sure you report that to your management. And that should be reported to law enforcement as well, but that depends on your hospital's policies. My hope is that anyone who assaults a healthcare worker gets law enforcement intervention. They need to be arrested. If it's a felony in your state, they need to be charged with that felony. Now, I know that doesn't always happen, but certainly it shouldn't be on us because we didn't report it. Well, that's all I have for this topic for now. I hope some of these tips helped you. And if they did, give me a shout out on social media or comment on this episode, and I'd appreciate your feedback. Have a good shift.
Thanks for listening to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook.